continuing our fall feast messages, and next up in line is the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot. Talked about the Day of Trumpets a couple Sabbaths ago. Last Sabbath we talked about the Day of Atonements. Today we will take our first look at the Feast of Tabernacles. It is 7 days long. It goes from the 15th day of the 7th month to the 21st day, with a high Shabbat, a high Sabbath on that first day. Leviticus 23. Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, the 15th day of this month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days unto Yah. The first day shall be a set-apart convocation. You shall do no servile work therein. Take a day off, whatever day it's on. It is the 15th day of the month when you shall be completely gathered in the fruits of your earth, because they were harvesting. Keep a feast, there's a rest. On this first day, you'll take goodly fruit of trees and branches and set up your booths to rejoice before Yah for 7 days. It is a statute forever in all your generations. And I'm highlighting rejoicing because that's what this feast is all about. It's about joy and rejoicing. As we get into it, you'll see where that joy is. The Feast of Tabernacles is also known as the Feast of Booths, the Feast of Ingathering, and in modern Hebrew it's Sukkot. And feast goes to the Hebrew word Hag, which is H2282, defined as a festival, a feast. The root word is to celebrate, dance, rejoice. And Tabernacles is defined as a booth, a temporary shelter, or Sukkot is plural. And the Feast of Ingathering, defined as a gathering in of crops. So we see from the Hebrew meanings where some of the definition and understanding of the Feast of Tabernacles really comes from. You'll dwell in booths 7 days. All that are Israelites shall dwell in booths to remember you came out of Egypt. I brought you through the wilderness. You were in booths for 40 years. You were in Sukkots. You were in tents for 40 years. And this is a remembrance of that. And also a remembrance that you are sojourning through this land. The Feast of Tabernacles is celebrated all over the world. A couple pictures of some modern Sukkots in different forms. And the Feast of Booths, interesting couple of pictures from Israel itself, some children going down to the Sea of Galilee to gather the branches just like they used to do. They're out on the water with a water booth. So we look at Noah for some confirmation. The 7th week of the first year, in this Jubilee, Noah planted vines on the mountain on which the ark had rested. And they produced fruit in the 4th year, and he guarded the fruit and gathered it in the 7th month. And that's sort of a verification of when crops were gathered. The barley was gathered beginning at the day of first fruits at the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the wheat was beginning to be gathered at the Feast of Weeks, or Shavuot, and all the rest of the crops over the summer harvested, processed, and stored prior to the Feast of Tabernacles: grapes, olives, nuts, and fruits, etc. And they were all done by the time this feast showed up. They were done with their yearly harvesting, their yearly work. So it was truly, the hay was in the barn, the crops were in the storehouse, the wine was made, and it's time to really start celebrating. And that's what the Feast of Ingathering is known for. The Feast of Ingathering, when you have gathered in your labors out of the field. And labors out of the field can mean so many things in these days. It can mean going out to the field and harvesting fruit, or it can mean your labors, your good works unto him that we're supposed to present to him, right? And so it's when you've gathered in from thy corn floor, which is the threshing floor, and the winepress, and 3 times a year shall all your males appear before Yah in the Feast of Tabernacles. Now, do not appear before Yah empty. We're supposed to present something to him as an offering unto him at this time. Because in the ancient times, they've gathered in their harvest. They've got all the food, all their necessities, all the wine ready for the year, and they're not supposed to hoard it. They're supposed to take 10% of it back up to the feast and enjoy it. He told us to enjoy 10% at this feast. It can be yours, and you share it. And then that's giving unto him. So every man shall give as he is able, according to what Yah has blessed him with during that year. And this was part of the Feast of Ingathering. This is in Samaria. You can see they've ingathered a lot of fruit. And they're putting it on the roof of their Sukkot, their So let's go back and start looking at what the patriarchs did and give us an idea of some things in Sukkot that we might not have understood. We're going to look at Abraham's child of promise, which is Isaac. In the 7th month, the angels came back to Sarah, and she was already with child. Isaac had been born on the first fruits of the harvest, which was Shavuot, and we blessed them and announced all the things that have been decreed. All the seed of his sons should be Gentiles, except for one, and that's Isaac. He is the seed of promise. He's a set-apart seed. He will become the portion of the Most High, and all of his seed is falling into possession of Yah. That's a glorious thing, to be possessed by Yah. It should be unto Yah a people for his possession, the sons of Isaac, above all nations, and that it should become a kingdom and priest and a set-apart nation. And they both rejoiced when they heard this with exceeding great joy. And he celebrated a festival of joy in this month for 7 days, near where he had built the well of the oath, the altar there. He built booths for himself and his servants on this festival. And right here, he was the first one to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles on the earth. And you can see this is before Moses and Mount Sinai. These things were happening before he came down and specified the Torah to the children of Israel. He offered offerings to the Father, and all of the totals of the burnt offerings are divisible by 7. And that keeps going through here through the feasts of Sukkot. And offering unto Yah a sweet-smelling savor. He celebrated this feast, rejoicing with all his heart and all of his soul. 7 days, him and all that were in his house. He called the name of this festival the Festival of Yah, a joy acceptable to the Most High. Now, note a joy acceptable. There are many joys in life that may not be acceptable to the Father, but we can truly rejoice completely on these times in his way unto him, and it's acceptable unto him. He wants us to be joyful and happy. They shall celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles 7 days with joy, repeating joy, in the 7th month, a statute forever. Every day going around the altar with the branches. 7 times a day in the morning he praised and gave thanks for all things in joy. Now Jacob had brought his family back up to Bethel in the 7th month. And during that time Levi dreamed that they had ordained and made him the priest of the Most High, him and his sons forever. And then on the 15th of the month, him and all of his sons were eating with joy during this 7 days because they knew this feast. And they were keeping this feast just like Abraham had started keeping it. And he taught Isaac. And Isaac taught Jacob. And Jacob was now showing his sons. And they were all rejoicing in this festival every year. They were blessing and thanking Yah, who had delivered him out of all the tribulation that Jacob had had, and had given him his vow, his covenant, the renewal of the covenant that he had started with Abraham and passed on to Isaac and passed on to Jacob. And he tithed all the clean animals, again, showing that his laws and his will was given to the righteous even before Sinai in all things. They knew. Levi discharged right here on this day the priestly office at Bethel before Jacob, his father, in preference to his 10 brothers, and he was a priest there. The Levitical priesthood started right there on the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles. And on the 15th of the month, another vow that he vowed he would give a 10th of all that he had gathered in, and he celebrated 7 days with joy. All of these patriarchs are celebrating with great joy. Remember these things, because this is a shadow picture. It's ordained on the heavenly tablets, the tithe to eat before Yah from year to year. There's no limits of these days for this tithe. So enjoy this feast, but don't store it. Finish what you've got by the next year. Trust in him to provide for you yearly, and don't store this feast all by itself and think that you've got to do it all your own. He will provide for you. Now to David and Solomon. David wanted to build the house, the temple for Yah, but Yah told him, you have too much blood on your hands. Your son Solomon will build this temple. And David gave him all the instructions that he had received and all the materials. And then Solomon started building the house. And for all the work that Solomon made for the house of Yah, in the end was finished. And then Solomon assembled the elders and the heads of tribes, the chiefs of the fathers, the Levites unto Jerusalem to bring up the ark of the covenant out of the city of David, where David had it in the tabernacle during his kingship. And all of the men of Israel assembled themselves unto the king in the feast, which was in the 7th month. All the men of Israel were being assembled unto Jerusalem at the same time the temple was done. And the Levites took up the ark, and the priests brought the ark of the covenant of Yah into the most set apart place. And the Levites, which were singers, the musicians, being arrayed in white linen, having cymbals and psalteries, the guitars, the harps, the viols, many priests sounding with trumpets, they made a large sound, praising and glorifying and thanking Yah. They lifted up their voices with the trumpets, the instruments, the music. They praised him. He is good, and his mercy endures forever. Then Yah honored what they had done by building the temple, putting the ark into the most set-apart place, praising him, glorifying him, and then the house was filled with the cloud of the glory of Yah, that same cloud that led the children of Israel through the wilderness. This cloud showed up again on this day, and the priests then could not stand to minister because of the cloud. The glory of Yah filled the house. It was too bright. It was too glorious. They couldn't stand it. It was too bright for them. Think about that. Our Father responded to doing his will, setting up his house, praising and glorifying him with righteousness, and he filled his new dwelling with his glory. This is our example. It's all shadow pictures. Where's his house now, right? Well, our Messiah says, I say unto you that in this place where he was is one greater than the temple. And Paul says, don't you know where the temple is? Don't you know that the Spirit of Yah dwells in you? And he tells us where the temple is. So we know what that example is, right? Now think about the glory in that temple that drives the priest out brighter than the sun. Think about that amazing picture right there on the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles, the high Sabbath, when they dedicated the temple, dedicated the altar, put the ark in there, and then the glory shot out, this dwelling of Yah and the glory within. And then Solomon started to pray. He stood before the altar and then kneeled upon his knees before all the congregation of Israel. He humbled himself as king before all the people, spread forth his hands towards heaven and said, Yah, there is none like you in the heavens or in the earth, which keeps covenant with us and shows mercy unto your servants that walk before you with all their hearts and all their minds and all their souls. And if your people of Israel be put to the worst before the enemy, because they have sinned before you, if they pray towards this place, confess your name, and turn away from their sin, teshuvah, repent, then you will hear from heaven and forgive the sins of your servants and of your people Israel, whom you have taught in the good way, wherein they should walk, and send rain upon your land, which you've given this land unto your people for an inheritance. And he continues in the prayer, but will Elohim in very deed dwell with the men on the earth? Behold, heaven and heaven of heavens cannot contain you. How much less this house which I have built will contain you? And that's an amazing statement. During his prayer, he says, will Yah in very deed dwell with the men on the earth on the first day of Tabernacles? Now, when Stephen was giving his testimony before he was stoned, Acts 7, he said, who found favor before Yah and desired to find a tabernacle for the Most High, the Elohim of Jacob. The Most High does not dwell in temples made with hands. As said the prophet, heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool. What house will you build me? What is the place of my rest? Hath not my hand made all of these things? Straight from Isaiah 66, when he references the prophet, he says, thus says Yah, heaven is my throne, earth is my footstool. What type of house will you build me? And what kind is to be the place of my rest? To be future tense. And to whom will I have respect, but to the humble and the meek and the man that trembles at my words? And there's two there. The humble and the meek, which we saw on the Day of Atonements, You deny yourself, you humble yourself. That's who he's looking for, the humble heart. And also the man that trembles at my words. We are all sinners in this keeping to the spirit of the law. And then Stephen continues, you circumcised in heart and ears. Why do you always resist the set apart spirit? As your fathers did, so do you. Which of the prophets have your fathers not persecuted? And they have slain them which showed before of the coming of the just one, of whom you have now been the betrayers and murderers of. And Isaac was sawn asunder, as it said in Hebrews, and the ascension of Isaiah. And so they killed the prophets that spoke the truth. And then Solomon continued in his prayer. And then when he finished praying, the fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offering and the sacrifices that was at the dedication of the altar on the first day of Tabernacles. And the glory of Yah still filled the house. The priest still could not enter the house. And all the children saw how the fire came down and the glory of Yah upon that house. They bowed themselves with their faces to the ground upon their pavement and worshipped and praised him, saying, he is good and his mercy endures forever. This is the high Shabbat, high Sabbath of the Feast of Tabernacles, at the dedication of the altar, the dedication of the temple to bring the Ark of the Covenant in, and the glory of Yah fills the house, and fire comes down and consumes the altar. What a glorious picture. And then in the 8th day, they made a solemn assembly, for they kept the dedication of the altar for the 7 days and the feast for 7 days. And on the 23rd day, they departed into their tents, which shows the ending of that Feast of Tabernacles. And I'm going to take a detour here, and you'll see why. Let's look at something called the division of the priestly courses. When David had given Solomon all the plans for the temple, it included how the temple was supposed to be constructed. He had all the gold and the silver and the brass and the cedar ready to go. He also had how to work inside the temple for the priest and the porters and the Levites who are the singers and musicians. And he had set all this up in a plan, and he gave this plan to Solomon. And concerning the division of the priestly courses, because things had to be done in the temple every day of the year. And he said, these are the divisions of the sons of Aaron, which are the high priest, the family of the high priest. And David distributed them to Solomon. And then there were lots given to different families. And the 8th was Abijah, and the lots were from the first lot to the 24th lot. That's in 1 Chronicles 24. Then David gave to Solomon his son this pattern, and the pattern of all that he had taken by the Spirit of Yah, the courses of the priest and the Levites, and for the work and the service. And he established according to the order of David when he had set up the temple, the courses and the priests, and that according to their public ministration and the Levites that were appointed. And so they started this right when the temple was dedicated, right after the Feast of Tabernacles. And there's a lot of discussion on these priestly courses, how they were, how long they were, etc. Well, if you happen to just go look in your scriptures, it will tell you all these things. And the priest and their brethren were to come after 7 days from time to time on a regular basis. For these Levites were in their set office, and some of them, of the sons of priests, made ointments of the spices. That's in 1 Chronicles. So that tells you that there's this division of priests. These priestly courses were 7 days long, and there were 24 of them. And the Levites did all things that the priest had commanded, and the men that were to come in on Sabbath with them that were to go out on Sabbath, for the priest, the high priest, had not yet dismissed the courses. Now that tells us when the priests were coming in and out. The priests started on Sabbath and they ended on Sabbath. Josephus says in Antiquity of the Jews that one course should minister to Yah 8 days from Sabbath to Sabbath, which is different from scriptures. But then if you happen to go into rabbinic writings, which I hesitate to go into, but this is historical, it says that the outgoing course offered the daily morning sacrifice and the additional offerings, and the incoming course offered the daily evening sacrifice and the censers. And that tells you that they came in probably about high noon, the 6th hour of the day. One course started about noon on Sabbath, and they worked until almost noon of the following Sabbath, and that is, when you look at it, 7 days. And that's how the scripture lines up with what Josephus was trying to say. 7-day courses starting from Sabbath to Sabbath. The division of the priests happened every week except for a couple times a year when there were all hands on deck. 2 Chronicles 5, wherefore all the men of Israel assembled themselves unto the king in the feast, which was in the 7th month. Of course, they're all coming together to the feast. And the priests took care of all the sacrifices for all the people that came up. And you can imagine, it wasn't just a daily sacrifice, this was all the people of Israel coming in with their sacrifices. One course wouldn't satisfy the entire nation. All the priests that were present were sanctified at this time and did not then wait by course during the feasts. They had to have all hands on deck to take care of the sacrifices and the supplications. The priestly order summary. There were 24 divisions of priests, with each division of priests serving at the temple for 7 days, Sabbath, and the entire following week through the Sabbath. The priests had public ministry functions during the time of their division service, and all the priests were sanctified and served during the feast. Now, with all of that information, we can show what the division of the priesthood looks on a year-to-year basis, knowing his calendar, the way it's formatted per Enoch and Jubilees. And this is how they did it. They had 24 courses that started every week after the Feast of Tabernacles, when it started with Solomon. And when the 24th course was done, was the time for Passover and unleavened bread, which is 8 days and falls variant days of the week. And the priests had to get there and set up and prepare the animals that were coming in. And that's why they spent 2 weeks all together supporting the temple during the 2 main feast times that were 8 days in total between the 2 feast periods. Now, we looked at Abijah. He was the 8th course of the 24. Abijah would serve during the 9th month of the Hebrew calendar, and he would serve on the 3rd month of the Hebrew calendar. And if you look at how that lined up with the feasts, on his 2nd term of the year, after all the priests had supported Passover and unleavened bread, and then you have the first 7 courses of priests lines up with the weeks of the Omer. The 8th course, Abijah, will support the 8th week, which starts with Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks. Now, why is that important? Let's look at Luke. In the days of Herod, king of Judea, a certain priest named Zechariah, in the course of Abijah, the Greek spelling right there, Abijah, however you want to say it, it's the same course. This is the course of the priesthood we've just looked at in detail. And his wife was barren. They were both righteous, walking in all the commandments and ordinances of him blameless. They kept him blamelessly. They were walking righteously before the laws given at Sinai. They had no child. It came to pass that while he executed the priest's office before Elohim in the order of his course, right there it's telling you that while he was in the division of the priesthood under Abijah, during his week there, this event happened. According to the custom of the priest's office, his lot was to burn incense when he went into the temple of Yah, and the lot selection was a one-time event for priests. While he went in, the whole multitude of the people were praying outside the temple at the time of incense. And then the angel appeared to Zechariah and told him, "Fear not, your prayer is heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you will call his name John." He was questioning the angel, and he lost his hearing and he lost his speech because he questioned the angel. And so the last thing that he heard was the words of the angel commanding him what to do. And the last thing that he spoke was his questioning of the word of Yah until 9 months later. But the people outside waited for Zechariah while all this was happening inside the temple, and they marveled that he tarried so long inside. This incense rite was not supposed to take this long, and they're waiting for him. They're waiting for the blessing. The priest would come out after the incense and come out to all the people that were assembled there and bless the people. When he came out, he could not speak to them, and they perceived that he had seen a vision in the temple. And as soon as his ministration days were over, he departed to his own house. Now what's that saying? He was in his priestly course, and we know he did it twice a year, in the 9th month and the 3rd month. Which one was it? Tells us right there. It says the whole multitude of the people. The 9th month in the Hebrew calendar is about December in our time. December in Jerusalem is cold. All the people are going to be at their homes spread all around Judea and Israel. There's going to be very few people up at the temple in the middle of winter. But on his second division, which is the 3rd Hebrew month, which happens to be during the Feast of Weeks, Shavuot, everybody is commanded to be there. And it says the whole multitude of the people were waiting. This is a one-day feast. They're all at the temple. And they're all focused on this priest that went into the temple and tarried and couldn't tell them what happened. But they knew something had happened. So we know that this prophecy for John the Baptist, John the Immerser, happened on Shavuot to the day. What does that tell us? It tells us the timeline to when Messiah was born. Because in the 3rd month, as we just saw, Zechariah received the prophecy for John on the day of Shavuot, on the Feast of Weeks. And then in Luke 1:23 it says, as it came to pass, as soon as the days of his ministration were accomplished, he departed to his own house. And after those days, his wife Elizabeth conceived. So early to mid-March, he's in Jerusalem. He has a week there because Shavuot's on the first full day of his watch. Then after that week, he departs back to his home. At some point, she conceives, but then she won't know that for, 2 to 3 weeks-ish? So it's going to be another month before she realizes that she's conceived. And that would be the next month. Then, Luke 1:24, the next verse says, Elizabeth then hid herself 5 months. She hid herself away. She departed. And so we can say from the 5th to the 9th month, she hid. The next month, which is the 6 months of Elizabeth's pregnancy, Mary receives her prophecy. In the 6th month, meaning the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, the angel said to Mary, fear not, you shall conceive in your womb and bring forth a son, and you shall call his name Yahushua. Thy cousin Elizabeth, this is the 6th month with her. And then as soon as she heard that, Mary arose in those days and went to the whole country with haste. She didn't wait weeks. She just packed up the next day and got to Elizabeth's house. And when she entered into the house of Zechariah and Elizabeth and saluted her, when Elizabeth heard her there, the baby John the Baptist, John the Immerser, leaped in her womb with joy. He already knew. She was already conceived when she got there. And she got there quickly during that very same month. And she stayed with Elizabeth 3 months. And why is it 3 months that she stayed? Well, when you look again at the Hebrew calendar, the 10th month is getting towards January, end of December, January. She's going to stay in the winter house, just like they all did, for the 3 months. And when it started to get warm outside and the delivery time is near, she went back to Joseph and probably prepared to come up to Jerusalem again for the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which was right around the corner, right after wintertime. The first month, the following year, right after Mary leaves, is when Elizabeth delivers John. Now Elizabeth's full time came that she should be delivered, and she brought forth a son. Mary conceived 6 months after Elizabeth. So in the 7th month, Miriam delivered her firstborn son. That's why the priestly courses have amazing clues in them. There was no room at the inn. A decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered, not taxed, but registered. Joseph took Mary and went down to the city of David, which was Bethlehem, to be registered with Mary, who was with child. While they were there, the days were completed for her to be delivered, and she brought forth her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them at the inn. All in the past, we always thought, Augustus Caesar made this tax and everybody rushed to the towns. And those people beat Joseph and Mary there, and that's why there was no room at the inn. No. Think about a census. You get the census letter in the mail. You've got all year to turn it in. You can write your information in and send it in the next day. You could wait till the end of the year. Joseph waited until it was convenient for him to go to Bethlehem because it was the 7th month. He had to be in Jerusalem, as all males are supposed to appear 3 times a year for the Feast of Yah, which was the Feast of Tabernacles on the doorstep. And so he went to Bethlehem to do his enrollment, his census. Why was the inn full? Because Jerusalem's packed. 1 million people, maybe. Jerusalem's very nearby, 6 miles away. Many people there couldn't live in booths. There were many infirm, many pregnancies of those 1 million people that had come, and so the inns were packed for all the people that had rushed to Jerusalem and beat Joseph and Mary there for the feast. I just wanted to note how tough Mary was, because this is pretty impressive. Joseph went out of the city of Nazareth to Bethlehem, and he took Mary, who was with child, almost to be delivered. She was 9 months pregnant. Nazareth is about 65 miles north of Bethlehem. The journey is about 95 miles with all the winding of the roads and the mountainous regions. And she was on a donkey between 4 and 6 days every day, 9 months pregnant, going about 15 miles a day on a donkey. But she's pretty tough. Mm-hmm. So this is giving us the clues of when Messiah was born. But in the Gospel of John, he actually just tells us. He tells us when it happens. Look at Solomon's prayer on the first day of Sukkot. But will Yah in very deed dwell with the men of the earth? John 1:1, Hebrew Gospels. In the beginning, the Son was Eloah. The son of El was born with El, and the son of El was Eloah. King James, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Yah, and the Word was Yah. For all things were made by him, and without him nothing is made, for he is life. And then John 1:14 says, and so El was made flesh and dwelt among you. Will Elohim in very deed dwell with the men on the earth? Yes. What does dwelt mean in Greek? To tent, to encamp, to reside. Dwell, tabernacle, and the root word of that is as a hut or a temporary residence, an abode of the Spirit figuratively. John tells us point blank. Messiah's birthday was on the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles, which is the 15th day of the 7th month, which is the high Sabbath. Everything that he does is on his feast, and the important days are on high Sabbaths. And all these things are shadow pictures. Will Yah in very deed dwell with men on the earth? Yes. He was made flesh and dwelt among you at this very time. Great signs in the skies. Revelation 12:1, there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. Now this is a sign in the sky, a moedim, a moed, an appointed time, as we've looked at, and the moon is being used as an example of a moed there. And the interesting occurrences of this type of astronomical event, we know of the one that happened in 2017, but there was another one that happened in the fall, in September in 2 BC. An interesting clue. Going back to the birth, she brought forth her newborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger. There was no room for them at the inn. And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. Now that's another clue right there, because Bethlehem and Jerusalem in the months of September or October, pretty temperate, 57 to 61 degrees at night. That's the range. But in December and January, the average lows is 39 to 43 degrees. And it's a rainy season. At that time, the shepherds are going to be packed up in their buildings with the sheep to protect them over the winter at night, just like everybody does around here. So when they say the shepherds were keeping the flock at night, we know it wasn't in the middle of winter. Now, look at what the angel said. The angel of Yah came upon these shepherds, and the glory of Yah shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. Does that sound like anything we just saw recently? And the angel said to them, fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you this day is born in the city of David a Savior, which is Messiah. Thinking back to 2 Chronicles, first day of the temple, the priests could not stand to minister. They're probably sore afraid, just like they were at Sinai when his glory came down, for the glory of Yah filled the house of Elohim. Where's his house now? It first started with his son like that. The glory filled his son, just like the shadow picture of the glory filling the temple on that first day, the first day of Tabernacles. Leviticus 16, you shall keep for yourself the Feast of Tabernacles, And what does he say at this feast? You shall rejoice in your feast. You're going to rejoice. Why? Because the angel brought good tidings of great joy for this day. You, your son, your daughter, the manservant, the maidservant, the Levite, the stranger, the orphan, and the widow, and everyone that is in your cities. He's saying everybody. That's all people. Just like the angel said, good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. And in Zechariah 14 it says, whoever shall be left of all the nations, they shall come every year to worship the King, Yah Almighty, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. The angel stating the fulfillment of that prophecy. The glory of Yah came down. It says the glory shone around them from the angels that was coming from Yah. The angel brought good tidings of great joy, just as it says in Leviticus, you shall celebrate this feast with joy. You're going to rejoice. And what did Abraham and Isaac and Jacob do at this feast repeatedly, as we saw? Great rejoicing, great joy at this feast. And all people will rejoice. And this shall be the sign unto you. You shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. This glory of Yah is shining around the angels, and they're saying, he's born. Now I'm going to tell you where he is. This is the sign. He's wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And we're going, okay, tell us where to go, right? An interesting side note. The shepherds said to each other after the angels departed, let's go unto Bethlehem and see this thing which has come to pass, and Yah made known to us. And when they'd seen it, they made known abroad everywhere they went the saying which was told to them concerning this child. And all the people that heard this wondered at the things that the shepherds had told them. Now, in part of the Talmud, this is interesting. This is in one of the books called Sanhedrin. Shepherds were not considered to be trustworthy as witnesses in front of the Sanhedrin. If they came to witness to the Sanhedrin, they weren't considered trusted witnesses. A very handy disqualification if any shepherd has to show up before them as a witness to saying, angels showed up, they told us Messiah born, and we verified that he was there. They wrote that into the rules for the Sanhedrin procedures. Shepherds are disqualified only in Palestine, but elsewhere they are eligible. Right around Jerusalem. A herdsman in general is ineligible, and a shepherd in general is incompetent. You can see how the synagogue of Satan continually targets everything that Yah does. So now let's look back at the sign they gave. You're going to find him wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. Micah 5:2. But you, Bethlehem Ephratah, though you be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of you shall he come forth unto me, that is to be the ruler in Israel, whose goings forth have been from old, from everlasting. And as most people know, Bethlehem means house of bread, and Ephratah means place of fruitfulness. Continuing on with Micah, you, O tower of the flock, the stronghold of the daughter of Zion, to you it shall come, even the first dominion shall come. The first dominion. The kingdom of the daughter of Jerusalem. Now, tower of the flock, when you say it in Hebrew, is Migdal Eder. And to understand that a little bit, we go back to Genesis. And when they were traveling from Bethel, there was just a little bit of way to get to Ephratah, and Rachel travailed, and she had hard labor. And the meaning of Rachel in Hebrew is ewe, as in a female sheep, especially a mature one. And when it came to pass, as her soul was departing, for she died during childbirth, that she called his name Ben-Oni, but his father called him Benjamin. Ben-Oni means son of my sorrow, but Benjamin in Hebrew means son of the right hand. So what's this clue saying? This is about the birth of the son of Israel. A baby male lamb was born from a ewe, a mature mother sheep. His mother called him the son of my sorrow, but his father renamed him the son of the right hand. Isaiah 53, he is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. And then when Messiah was brought to the temple for circumcision, Simeon blessed them and said unto Mary his mother, yes, a sword shall pierce through your soul also. His mother called him a man of sorrows. But in Acts 2, this Yahusha hath Elohim raised up, whereby we are all witnesses, says Peter. Therefore, being by the right hand of Elohim exalted, and having received of the Father the promise of the set-apart Spirit, he has shed forth this, which you now see and hear. And that shows you that the Father says, son of the right hand, you are at my right hand, son. This was at the first dominion. Again, shadow pictures of Messiah. This is a possible place for Rachel's tomb that was taken in the 19th century. Rachel died and was buried on the way to Bethlehem, and Jacob set up a pillar upon her grave. Then he journeyed onward and spread his tent beyond the Tower of Adar. And the Tower of Adar is defined in Hebrew as the Tower of the Flock, Migdal Eder. So Rachel's foreshadowing happened around this place called Migdal Eder, Tower of the Flock. This is a possible original Migdal Eder site. It's not known for sure, but you can sort of see what the tower might have looked like, the Tower of the Flock. This is another possible one. Don't know. And we think we're coming up with amazing new information, but sometimes we're just relearning what past generations already knew has been covered up recently. The Tower of the Flock hymn, all the way back from the mid-1800s to late 1800s when this hymn was written. Declared the prophet Micah, there stood near Bethlehem town, the Tower of the Flock, where in holy Zion came he. Now, Migdal Eder in Bethlehem, the Tower of the Flock, was the structure used to breed and maintain the flocks of lambs destined to be sacrificed at the temple for the feasts and other appointed times. The upper level was used by the shepherds to watch the flock in the fields and to sleep. The ground level floor was where the lambs were kept for shelter, feeding, and birthings when needed. And you can see some information on that again from rabbinical teachings. Some shepherds happen to be priests. And in Exodus says, your lamb shall be without blemish, the Passover lamb. The shepherds that tended the sacrificial flocks around Migdal Eder, around Bethlehem, would have been specially trained to ensure that these lambs remained unblemished. You couldn't bring a lamb that had been tarnished up to Passover or any other feast for sacrifice to Yah. It had to be without blemish. It had to be without blemish from birth to delivery to the temple. So these priests made sure that the lambs were taken care of in all ways. And one of the ways that they took care of them was the time of birth, because this was a time of high risk. Anytime a lamb was born, it could scar itself by kicking its legs in a first effort to stand up or when it falls. The shepherds were able to ensure this didn't happen, though. How did they do that? They made sure the lamb wouldn't hurt itself by kicking. They used swaddling clothes and mangers. Wrapping the lamb in cloth strips would keep the lamb immobile with straightened legs so the hoofs couldn't scar itself on its first days. The swaddled lambs would be laid in a clean manger for safety and for thorough inspection to make sure that they were truly unblemished in all ways until they were strong enough to join their mother. The manger was off the floor so they would not get accidentally trampled by the mother where they were immobilized in swaddling clothes. This was a strict procedure that they kept, a special procedure to ensure that the sacrificial lambs to these feasts, to Passover, were perfect. And so they used swaddling clothes, strips of cloth, and laid them in special mangers in this special tower that they have, Migdal Eder. For the Lamb of Yah, from the angel's instructions, the shepherds knew exactly where to find this newborn Messiah because this only described one place to them. They were the priestly shepherds. They were the ones that wrapped all the newborn temple sacrificial lambs in swaddling clothes and laid them in mangers in the Tower of the Flock in Migdal Eder, just outside of Bethlehem. Behold the Lamb of El, which takes away the sins of the world. The Lamb of Yah, the sacrifice for the world's iniquities, was wrapped in swaddling clothes and laid in a manger in Migdal Eder at the first day of Tabernacles. The glory of Yah filled the house of Elohim. In this place, one is greater than the temple. And that's the shadow picture for the body that Messiah received, a body you have prepared for me. And the glory of Yah was shining through him. The light of the world. We've heard in the past, he is the reason for the season.
Right.
Well, he is the reason for the season, but what's the season?
Full.
We understand now that the scriptures always told us the reason, but they also told us the season as well. He is the reason for the season. The feasts are the shadow pictures. Which body is Messiah? He is the reason. This is the season. It's his feast. The feast of joy, the feast that all nations will celebrate in for all eternity. Because we honor Messiah's birth by celebrating this feast, the Feast of Tabernacles. And that's only the beginning of this feast. Thank you, everyone.